The following broadcast contains the sole opinions of Cyberpunk Jordan and does not represent anybody else but him. This broadcast includes a skip story feature. To skip to the main content of this video, simply skip to
Insert section here.
or select the timestamp in the video description. But why would you want to do that again? This broadcast also contains information that should not be construed as legal advice, because I'm not a lawyer, just a horse interested in copyright law. Alright, so let me understand all this. I'm an anthropomorphic horse now because of apparently serious injuries I sustained from our escape from the I Corporation Mall, which this mysterious Order of the Seas or whatever that helped us couldn't fix due to the widespread lack of medical expertise from this transformation event that made everyone anthropomorphic. And then there was this last vial of serum that caused it on the I Corporation oil rig or whatever it was called. And Bob 18 had to be sacrificed for it because of this bloodlust character. And while all this was happening, you destroyed the I Corporation oil rig, which was one of their most valuable, albeit ill-defended assets of the I Corporation, causing us to skyrocket to the top of their to-kill list, and while finding somewhere to hide, I fainted into a 5-month coma? Wow, that's a lot to take in. So, any ideas on what we're going to be doing next? I honestly think we should take the first option. I should have expected that from you. By the way, who the heck would leave their car in the middle of an abandoned gas station anyway? Does that bode well for us?
This is an urgent message for members of the I Corporation Psychic Corps. Initiate Protocol M. Repeat, initiate Protocol M. This is not a testing exercise.
Huh. So, you think we might be able to find something out here on that Protocol M that radio was talking about? I don't think so. Hey, I never ended up getting my driver's license, so be a little easy on me. What's the big deal about this place anyway? Wait, why were they considered lost? You're kidding me, right? No, well, I mean, we did have conversations about digital preservation, especially video games. Sure, I think it might be a good idea so we don't accidentally fall asleep while looking through these books. Although my story might do that anyway. The creation and subsequent popularity of technology and the internet has brought all sorts of new challenges and issues that need to be addressed, and one of them is the topic of the digital preservation of older video games. Like other forms of mass media, such as movies and television shows, video games are equally at risk to being lost forever due to the frequent discontinuation of hardware/software and, by extension, eventually being unusable or difficult to obtain. There have been attempts by companies such as Microsoft and Sony to address these issues, such as frequently offering digital services, backwards compatibility, or collections that make older games readily available on newer systems. But there is one company that's seemingly aloof to making a lot of its titles readily available to current generations. And that's Nintendo. Nintendo, founded in 1889 in Kyoto, Japan, is responsible for some of the most celebrated games and respective franchises in the medium. It's nearly impossible to list them all in this one video, but some examples include Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, Animal Crossing, and Chibi Robo. Wait, what's that? Chibi Robo isn't one of the most celebrated franchises for Nintendo? Anyway, these titles and their respective franchises have impacted millions of people around the world, in some cases cementing a love of video games, inspiring them to create their own stories, and in other cases pursue making their own video games. I'm no different in this regard, with Super Mario Sunshine and Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year-Old Door on the Nintendo GameCube being some of the first video games I ever played. I seriously doubt I would be into gaming today if it weren't for these games, but these, along with other titles, are currently unavailable on newer systems due to a lack of backwards compatibility with older systems, or the lack of availability on official emulations such as the Virtual Console or Nintendo Switch Online. It's true that there are a handful of older titles re-released by the company, more on that in a moment, but this is only one shelf compared to an entire library. Thus, the lack of official access to these older titles creates a vacuum for said access. And when there's a vacuum for something, someone is going to try and fill that vacuum. In 2018, the owners of sites LoveRoms.com and LoveRetro.co faced a lawsuit from Nintendo that resulted in an enormous $12,230,000 settlement. LoveRoms.com and LoveRetro.co were sites that hosted ROMs, or read-only memory files, of various video game titles that could be subsequently used in emulators. It's important to note that emulators, with the absence of proprietary code, is pretty much legal here in the United States, but unauthorized distribution of ROMs are not due to the copyrighted nature of these files. Therefore, similar ROM sharing sites that host these files without permission are bluntly committing violations of copyright and trademark law. But it's often argued that these ROMs are only for those who have legitimate copies of the titles in question, which backing up one's collection could be an argument for fair use. However, these sites can't guarantee that everyone who downloads these are owners of the games themselves, nor are not still responsible for sharing these files without permission. The argument of unavailability of a title also doesn't work either. While noting that certain aspects surrounding ROMs and legality are currently open questions, it nonetheless seems like Nintendo at least has a clear-cut case against these sites. Right? Legally? Absolutely. These are illegal sites distributing copyrighted ROMs without official permission. But that doesn't mean that it's the best strategy, nor does it mean that their piracy issue is not unintentionally self-created. Piracy exists in a vacuum or absence of something, which in this case is the lack of availability or compatibility of older titles from Nintendo. But a common counterargument is that there are ways to access these older titles through newer means, with examples such as the Nintendo Virtual Console, Nintendo Switch Online, Nintendo Game Store, and Nintendo Mini Systems. But these methods are flawed at least and lackluster at worst. So let's briefly go over them. The Nintendo Virtual Console refers to a selection of older titles available for individual purchase, with the currently available console having this being the 3DS, 2DS line of systems. On those consoles, there's a handful of older titles from Nintendo the Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color. While understanding the technical limitations of the 2DS, 3DS that might prevent certain systems from being emulated correctly, it nonetheless isn't anywhere near the library of titles that it could be. As of this writing, this is also the currently only available console that features the Nintendo Virtual Console. Both the Wii and Wii U also featured the service and include a comparably better selection of titles in my opinion, with the earlier also having that distinct music. You know the one. But both consoles have been discontinued, and the earlier was even shut down along with other elements of the Nintendo Wii Shop channel in 2019. The Wii U still has its virtual console, but the console is no longer widely available due to its discontinuation, and the overall poor sales of the system mean very few people probably have access to it. But what about the Nintendo Switch? Well, the virtual console is non-existent on the Nintendo Switch, instead being replaced with a subscription-based service accessed with Nintendo Switch Online. While this seems like an interesting, dare I even say neat, idea, the available titles currently on the system are disappointing, with only a small handful of titles from the Nintendo Entertainment System. It doesn't even compare to the library of the Nintendo Virtual Console, which itself was limited in all of its forms. But maybe there's an official store where they sell these products. Well, what do you know? They do have an official store. And look, they have a classic products section. I wonder what they have. Yeah, besides some titles and scattered accessories for their older systems, there's not very much on the store in terms of older systems. But they do have some refurbished NES and SNES mini systems, which leads to... Honestly, out of all the offerings in terms of official emulation of older titles, I really like the idea of the NES and SNES Mini. These are smaller consoles that mimic the Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo Entertainment System, which include a selection of titles from their respective systems. While limited in their library and lacking expandability, I thought they were excellent and reasonably priced mini consoles. Unfortunately, these are now discontinued, with Nintendo seemingly having no plans to create more mini systems. And that's most of the offerings I could find from Nintendo. There are of course third-party sites such as eBay and stores such as GameStop that do sell older systems, but there are also serious issues with these methods, like being a complete crapshoot in terms of what's available, and no permanent guarantee about the workability of the consoles/games in question, especially when purchasing online. Because of these aforementioned reasons, I've concluded that Nintendo is inadvertently creating its own piracy problem. How? By restricting limiting access to their older library of systems with little to no legal ways to play these titles otherwise, they're creating a vacuum for others to exploit. Nonetheless, they consistently argue that people should purchase and play their games legally, but also offer little to no mechanisms to actually do that. It creates a situation where the lack of access allows sites hosting illegal downloads of Nintendo ROMs to thrive, with their availability similar to the mythical Hydra. Nintendo can rightfully use the sword of lawsuits to cut off one of these illegal sites down, but more sites will grow in its place if access to these older titles continues to be lackluster or non-existent. The current strategy of Nintendo with their older library is conclusively flawed and impossible to enforce legally, at least mostly. This is where most videos on this topic would usually end, as I've not seen many videos on the topic discuss what solutions there could be to solve this issue. That's where I come in, because I know I've been harsh up to this point regarding their access to their older library, but that's because I legitimately love Nintendo. I want these titles to be preserved for future generations, such as my kids, and don't want the future of their library relegated to illegal ROM sharing sites. Forever. I've been hammering home the reason why this is happening is because of a lack of access to their older library. But once this access to their older library is created or even improved, you've basically destroyed the reason of existence for many of these sites. Because I'm about to make a bold claim, that most people who are considered pirates of these games aren't actually pirates at all. These are people who would purchase a product legally if given the chance to do so. Oh sure, there's like 2% of people who think they shouldn't pay for anything and simply illegally download whatever they want. I don't think anybody, including myself, can help them very much. But the other 98% of people likely do want to pay for it legally, you just need to offer access to it. I have a few suggestions to do that, ranging from lower cost but minor dents to the issue solutions to higher cost but higher dents of the issue solutions. None of these solutions are a zero-sum game either, where one side loses and the other side wins. All of them feature a balanced approach of increasing access to their older library while at the same time protecting Nintendo's various copyrights/trademarks. So without further ado... Nintendo Switch Online is flawed in various ways, but the idea of a subscription-based service for older titles isn't exactly a bad one. The issue is the lack of titles on said service, which can be easily remedied with the addition of more frequent and varied titles from the Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo 64, and Nintendo GameCube. It could also include Wii and Wii U titles, but those are a bit more trickier to emulate for due to the unique control schemes of each console. They're not impossible, just a bit difficult. Nonetheless, I think it would not only be a simple, albeit incomplete solution to the whole lack of access issue, but it could also serve as an incentive for driving sales of Nintendo Switch consoles and Nintendo Switch Online subscriptions. However, one flaw is that these emulations have to have people and quality to make it a reality, which of course is going to take time and money to do. Given the low cost of the service compared to its competitors such as PlayStation Plus and Microsoft Gold, an increase in games would likely result in an increased price of the service to offset the expenses in doing so, which I totally would be fine with if the amount of older titles was increased alone. But if they couldn't justify the cost of doing that... This is similar to the idea to expand the availability of older titles on Nintendo Switch Online, except through the Nintendo Virtual Console. It would likely be more reasonable and profitable for Nintendo to do this, as it could charge for each title individually rather than a flat fee for multiple titles. That's literally about it. What if Nintendo decided to expand their current online store to offer older systems and titles? This could allow people to own systems/games that they either already own but don't work anymore, or never had a chance to own until now. It could potentially partner with another retailer to achieve this, as there would be a lot of logistics in terms of selling these older systems and games. Nonetheless, as a positive, you don't have enormous costs related to emulation and quality assurance of said emulation, since you would be reselling systems and titles on their original hardware with minimal quality assurance to make sure everything just works. You're literally just selling your older systems/titles again, but in an online store. That's it. You know how Nintendo created the NES Mini and SNES Mini? What if it made something similar to that, but a dedicated device to officially emulate older hardware/software? This Nintendo Retro Box could emulate titles from the Nintendo Entertainment System to the Nintendo GameCube, because the Wii and Wii U had those weird control schemes I mentioned before. Through a mixture of both physical hardware, example having slots for console cartridges/disc readers, to software having an online store that allows people to purchase older titles. For the earlier, it could even use what's called ROM dumping, where the data of a game is dumped into a digital file, to make permanent instances of titles they own, circumventing that entire hardware/software issue where the hardware/software is no longer able to be used physically anymore. But that is the issue with all these solutions. I'm not saying that doing one of these solutions would be totally worthless. Doing at least one of them would actually help to solve the issue of access. But each of these rely on hardware/software that could become discontinued, unworkable, or difficult to obtain. So if Nintendo truly wants to solve the issue of piracy once and for all, allow me to use an old saying: if you can't beat them, join them. No, I'm not advocating for Nintendo to give approval of these illegal ROM sharing sites. Rather, I'm arguing that they should do it themselves as an extension of their Nintendo Game Store. Nintendo could build an official emulator that would be made available for computers, although if technically feasible, maybe they can include smartphones and tablets as well. It could build its own store, much like the Nintendo Virtual Console, to purchase and download titles for this emulator. But wouldn't this impact their current consoles/games? Well, it could, but a simple remedy would be to make titles available on the emulator only if they are no longer available to purchase through major retailers and outlets. The time it would take for something like this to happen would probably be a little more than a decade. Keep in mind, console generations are usually long, so we would encourage people not to wait around for the emulated version. You could even add some bells and whistles to make the emulator interesting, and also to protect it from the inevitable issue of illegal file sharing. Admittedly, all these solutions have their strengths and weaknesses in dealing with the issue of access, because the truth of the matter is there will never be a single solution that will single-handedly stop the issue. Nonetheless, even doing one of these solutions is better than their current strategy. Nintendo might even think of an even better solution than me, which I wouldn't be surprised at given the amount of creativity and talent at the company. Because some might think they are incapable of changing their stances on issues, but when looking back to new developments such as online connectivity and YouTube, they've been known to change their mind. Heck, maybe if enough people wrote a polite email or letter, I'm willing to bet they might listen. But I would encourage a solution sooner rather than later, because another truth of the matter is that the issue of access will continue to fuel piracy. Because the demand for preserving titles that are in someone's collection or that they can no longer access is regardless of both consequences from the law and the company that owns them, and the lack of access will only continue to fuel it. There's a chance for intervention to subside the issue, but time is running out, and there's a likelihood the issue is spiraling out of Nintendo's control. So, Nintendo can either accept the reality and try to make their library more accessible, or others will legally do it for them. So yeah, that was everything that happened up to that point. I'm not sure what the conclusion was, though.